Brent Blazer of the Office of Emergency Service would be the next on the list. Brent, what's going on?
How are you guys doing? Can you hear me okay?
Very well, thanks.
Fantastic. Um, so listening to everything that's going on, I think everybody knows we did a alert and warning exercise last week. What was it, the 25th? I forget, 26th. Um, that was a really big lift. Some of the interesting aspects that came out of that, looking at the survey responses, the survey technique that we used was a little bit not geocentric. If I had more resources, we could have done a lot more specific of really looking at where the responses came from and more analytic aspects behind it. But I will say that out of the responses, and I've already reported this to the FCC because they asked, over 40%, 40.5% of the people who responded said they did not receive the wireless emergency alert. And one of the reasons we didn't use Nixle in the actual exercise, if you would, was to kind of get a sense of, how many people would receive that type of notification. And that notification, for those on the panel here that don't know, is actually more of a radio transmission from a cellular cell tower. So it's not really truly a text message. And those of you that received it, that's why you would notice it on your phone. It didn't drop in like a text message. It kind of came into your dashboard on whatever device. So it's very dependent on terrain, cellular or infrastructure or broadband infrastructure and stuff. And then, and of course, whatever device you're looking at it from. The messaging we put out, all I can see is that it went through the federal systems and was received and actioned, but how well it was received on the other end is something you got to figure out. So like I said, only 40.5% of all the survey responses said that out of all the survey responses, 40.5% said they did not receive it. And then looking at the website that we built and looking at the analytics of the people who actually went to the site, approximately 85% were actually looking at the response or looking at the new site from a mobile device. So that was the other takeaway, is to kind of get an idea of, how are people getting information about emergencies and what are their trends in our communities. And that's a big thing to notice, is that, last year during the fires, I went back and I looked at we were sending out a link on Bitly to the emergency maps. So I can see the total number of hits, but I can't see, what kind of device they're using, what's their web browser, all those types of things. And so what you've seen last year was you were seeing, within 10 days, 1 million hits on the Bitly link. So you can see how important it is and how often people are going and looking for information. And then you can also see, in this last exercise we did, from the device they're using, how they're getting information is really on the mobile aspect. And so the processes that we need to be able to support with our infrastructure and our messaging really do need to be more geared towards mobile devices. So as I do the after action for the Board of Supervisors, and just for our county as a whole, I'll do the after action. We're going to submit that. It'll probably be part of what we're pulling together for the 22nd. You guys might want to take a look at that and pull it for whatever applications and justifications for support and programs in the future. And if you guys have any other questions, I think that was the most relevant information that came from last week. Oh, and otherwise, I do want to share with you that the state as a whole, in our profession, they're looking at a lot of things like AI, artificial intelligence, for watching cameras. I'm really pushing for that to be a state project. When it comes to communication, for alerting, that's kind of moving into the state arena. But that AI thing is, again, it's very much, whether it's AI or early notification for earthquakes, right? That sensory data that they're pulling and doing the early notification. All of that is all dependent on how good our infrastructure is in order to communicate back to the public, right? So you can tell us that you got 20 seconds of notification on an earthquake, but if the infrastructure can't support the communication aspect, those programs don't work for us. So, and finally, I would just say that rural counties have a much more higher threat when it comes to wildfire, flooding aspects, and all the way down to active shooter. We actually in rural counties have a higher potential threat from all these incidents than say the rural areas. So these are all great arguments for your applications moving forward. So thank you. And if there's any questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Brent. Any questions? Brent, what were the numbers of subscribers to the new emergency notification system? You mentioned some percentages, and I may have not heard.
So wireless emergency alerts don't require registration. And so, and I'm sharing this information because you guys are all community leaders too, and such. Because I got a lot of questions about why aren't we using Nixle? We use Nixle and stuff leading into the exercise, and those only cover those that are registered, right? Wireless emergency alerts kind of grab all the visitors we have to the counties, and of course should be people who live in the area and such. So it's more geocentric. So I can't tell you, how many people total should have gotten it. I can tell you that our population count for the county, and this is why I targeted the entire county, is 86,000 and change. So the idea was we're just going to shoot the whole county at message the whole county, and we were looking to see how much traffic came back. So that's the best I can answer you, is it should have impacted everybody, and even kind of went outside the county partially for any towers that transmitted outside of it.
And the surveys, were they a finite number, or when you say that 45% of those surveyed responded? Or
so the surveys, obviously we put those out on social media
okay.
after the fact. And so that I have to look at the exact number. We had about 450, I think, survey responses. So it's like any survey, and we kept it kind of simple, right? So that people weren't getting into the data with too many questions. And then also looking at some of the other statistics we can look at is what we were seeing on social media and other types of communication coming back.
Thank you.
Jeff?
So I guess maybe the obvious, sorry, Katie, I saw you too. What are the next steps? Do we feel like when the fire comes, we're ready?
Well, that's outside of the broadband, but yeah, honestly, the next steps are kind of enhance some of the website aspects, make sure validated that our processes are kind of good on the backside, right? And when I say processes, and those alerting processes are kind of when something really bad's happening, right? That a fire that's moving fast, that we're not sure what the infrastructure looks like in that area. So Nixle and Mendo Alert are for your registered, but when you really have to send the red balloon up, you're using things like emergency alert system and the wireless emergency alert system. And it's kind of important to kind of understand, how well is it covering the area, right? To do our diligence to say, is it effective? The messaging type is very different in each one of these platforms. It's kind of like looking at Twitter and Facebook. You only get so many characters, right? So in Nixle, I only get 160 characters in that text message. Then it goes into the web page and the emails, right? They all have different character counts. Same thing with, say, WIA, which is 90 characters on some devices and 360 on others. And so you have to kind of come up with what's the best way to phrase things so that people understand the areas you're talking about. And that was kind of integrating it a little bit of what we're trying to make sure we're doing a better job of defining evacuation zones, so that we're not trying to come up with the message as much, right? Because trying to figure out what to say can be really challenging in the moment. And so then it was also people learn different ways, whether it's we have not to lecture the Mendocino County Office of Education by any means, but sometimes people need a picture, and that helps break down the communication barrier. So by having some pre-staged evacuation areas and maps, even if we evacuate in smaller areas within evacuation zones, we can say evacuation within the vicinity of this zone, and then people should have a better idea of what we're referring to and be able to reference it on a map if possible faster than before. We had to create it and then put it up somewhere, and the links that we had, you couldn't find them at all, right? If you didn't have the link, they didn't live on a web page. There was no continuity to it. And so we're just closing some of those gaps. And I think the products that we just put out, I had a lot of different people look at it, and I think we're moving in the right direction. But the limiting factor is still, a lot of this stuff is online, right? And so how many people even have access when it comes to rural areas? I can't change that, but I can try to make what is available better. And I think that's what we've done.
Brad, I want to congratulate you for the hard work you're doing in Mendocino County. In Sonoma County, during the fires last year, the Walbridge fire, the county pushed out a lot of information, but in our rural areas, the folks did not have connectivity. We had no idea where the fire was, where it was going, what direction it was headed, and which created a lot of problems. So over the last 6 months, we've really amped up the ham radio operator GMRS networks locally. And this weekend on Sunday, we're having a simulated 7.0 earthquake test, with including liquefaction of the lower Russian River, collapse of highways, and so forth. So we'll be coordinating the cell operators, the ham radio operators, GMRS local radio people will be involved in it. And the county OES is going to be involved with 2 of our supervisors and the head of our Transportation and Public Works Department. So we're trying to fill in the missing gaps, if you will, in the utilization of public radio.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We have stood up in the last 6-7 months, Mendocino County Auxiliary Services. So just like ACS for Sonoma County. And I don't want to take away from, when I say we stood up, we had some great volunteer programs in the county for ham radio operators, and they are the backbone of it. All we have done is really kind of vetted them, and I'm kind of pulling in the volunteers, and really we have some volunteers that are running it, Mike Carter and such, and Steve that used to be part of MCOE. What I'm really doing is kind of trying to protect liability on the county side and making sure that we're vetting and approving some of their training. I don't want to take away from them by any means. They are the backbone, but we did that with the tsunami exercise this year, worked their communication aspect. And again, this goes back to our board, the executive staff, kind of giving us the go ahead to say, hey, you got to get this stuff done. And I'm not going to say any of it's perfect. I'm saying that we're making the moves to what is this? Perfection is the enemy of improvement, right? So we're gonna pivot quickly, very often, and keep making it better.
Thank you.